Hello, you're watching Betrayal and Beyond. It all started with a notification. A tiny, insignificant chime from my phone, lying face up on the kitchen counter. I was chopping vegetables for a dinner I didn't particularly want to eat, in a kitchen that was more her design than mine, living a life that had become a comfortable, well-worn sweater 2 sizes too small. The notification lit up the screen, a shared calendar event from my wife, Clara, *Dr. Roth confirmation and next steps. Asterisk. I didn't think much of it. Clara was a planner. Our lives were a meticulously curated collection of shared calendar events. Dentist, dinner with the Morgans, pay property taxes. But this one was different. I didn't recognize the name Dr. Roth, and the location attached was for the Westwood Fertility and Genetics Center, a gleaming private clinic on the other side of town. A cold, sharp stillness washed over me. The knife in my hand paused over a half-sliced carrot. Fertility clinic? We'd had the conversation about kids years ago, before we even got married. I had been open to it, maybe even wanted it in a distant, abstract way. But Clara had been firm. Her career was her focus, she'd said. She didn't have the maternal instinct. She loved our life, just the two of us, uncluttered and free. I had agreed. I loved her, so I'd adopted her dream as my own. I had packed away my own vague notions of fatherhood and put them in the same mental attic where I kept my old climbing gear and the worn-out passport filled with stamps from places she deemed too rustic. My first thought was that she'd change her mind. A surge of something complex, shock, hope, a little bit of resentment, rose in my chest. Why wouldn't she have told me? Why a secret appointment? I didn't confront her when she got home. I played the part of the dutiful husband, the man I had become for her. I asked about her day at the law firm, where she was on the fast track to partner. I served the dinner. We talked about a new series on Netflix. But my mind was miles away in that clinic, wondering what next steps meant. That night, I did something I'd never done in our 7 years together. I waited until she was asleep, her breathing deep and even, and I opened her laptop. My hands were trembling, my heart thudding with the guilt of a trespasser. Our password was a shared joke, the name of the terrible first movie we saw together. It felt like a betrayal to use it this way, but the unanswered question was a shard of glass in my gut. I went straight to the calendar. The appointment with Dr. Roth was there, set for next Tuesday. But as I scrolled back through the past few months, I saw a constellation of other secrets. More appointments at the clinic, sometimes twice a week. But there were other appointments, too, with someone else. A man. Marcus lunch. Marcus coffee. Marcus confirmed plans. Marcus Thorne was a senior partner at her firm. A rainmaker. Clara mentioned him often, always with a tone of reverence. He was a mentor, she'd said, guiding her career. The lunches and coffees could be innocent, but they were always scheduled on the same days as her visits to the clinic. It was a pattern, and my mind, which used to plot routes up cliff faces, started plotting the connections between these points. The picture it was forming was terrifying. The real evidence, the thing that shattered the foundation of my life, wasn't in the calendar. It was in her email. Buried in her trash folder was a chain of messages between her and her older sister. She must have forgotten to permanently delete it. The subject line was the Nightingale Plan. I clicked it open, and my world tilted on its axis. He has no idea, Clara had written a month ago. Asterisk, he's so absorbed in his safe little world, managing his clients' portfolios. He thinks I'm just getting regular checkups. The doctors say everything looks positive with Marcus's sample. We could be viable by October. Asterisk, Marcus's sample. Viable. The words were clinical, detached, like a business transaction. I felt the air leave my lungs. I scrolled down, my vision blurring. Her sister had replied. Asterisk, are you sure about this, Clara? Leaving him like this, it's brutal. What are you going to say? Asterisk, and Clara's response, the one that will be forever seared into my memory. Asterisk, it's the only way. I can't build the life I deserve with a man who is content to stand still. Marcus offers me a world Leo can't even comprehend. And this baby is my exit strategy. Once I'm pregnant, I can finally leave. I'll tell him I realized I desperately want a family and that he was the one who always said no. I'll be the heartbroken woman choosing her dream of motherhood over a man who wouldn't share it. Who could argue with that? It's the perfect narrative. He's been a good placeholder, but his chapter is over. Asterisk, a placeholder. His chapter is over. The perfect narrative. I felt a profound, chilling cold spread through me. So intense it felt like my blood was turning to ice. This wasn't just an affair. An affair is a messy, human mistake. This was a coup. A meticulously planned, long-term operation to replace me, executed under my own roof, funded by our shared life. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was creating my successor. She hadn't just lied about wanting kids. She had weaponized my agreement, my support of her dream, and was twisting it into a knife she planned to plunge into my back. She was going to erase our history and paint me as the villain in a story I didn't even know was being written. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of a laptop. The man looking back at me was a stranger. His face was soft, his eyes tired. This was the man who traded mountains for manicured lawns, adventure for asset allocation. This was the man who had willingly put himself on a shelf to make her happy. And his reward was to be a placeholder. I closed the laptop gently. The rage I should have felt was absent. The heartbreak was a distant echo. All I felt was a sudden, terrifying clarity. The problem wasn't that she was leaving me. The problem was that for the last 7 years, I had already left myself. And she was right about one thing. This chapter was over, but I will be the one to write the ending. The next morning was an exercise in flawless acting. I woke up at my usual time, went for my usual run, and made coffee just as I always did. When Clara came into the kitchen, a vision in a silk robe, I smiled and handed her a mug. It was the smile of the man she thought she knew. Reliable, content, a little boring. The placeholder. "You're in a good mood," she observed, raising an eyebrow as she sipped her coffee. "Just thinking," I said, leaning against the counter. "About the future. What we want. Where we're going." A flicker of something, panic? Suspicion? Crossed her face before she concealed it. "Oh, what about it?" "Nothing specific. Just feeling like maybe we've gotten a little too comfortable. A little stagnant," I said, using a word I'd read in her emails. "Maybe it's time to shake things up." This was the perfect bait, and she took it, seeing it as an opening for her own narrative. "I know what you mean," she said, her voice softening with practiced empathy. "I've been feeling that way for a while, Leo." "I know," I said, "and I think you're right." I let that hang in the air for a moment before turning back to the sink. The performance was exhausting, but it was necessary. She needed to believe she was in complete control of the story, right up until the moment I revealed she'd been reading from the wrong script. That afternoon, I told her I was going to finally clear out the attic, a chore I'd been putting off for years. She barely looked up from her laptop. "Great, just don't make a mess." The attic was hot and smelled of dust and decaying memories. But for me, it felt like an archaeological dig into my own lost civilization. There was my old expedition backpack, the chalk bag still clipped to the side, my climbing ropes coiled like sleeping snakes, and my passport. I flipped through the pages, the faded stamps from Nepal, Argentina, and Thailand feeling like relics from another man's life. This was the man she'd met, the one with calloused hands and stories in his eyes. The man I had let her bury under layers of sensible sweaters and shared calendar events. I sat on a dusty trunk and pulled out my climbing gear. The cams and carabiners felt cool and solid in my hands, a tangible connection to the person I used to be. My fingers still remembered the familiar knots. I checked the webbing on my harness. It was old, probably unsafe for a real climb, but it represented a part of me that was still intact, just waiting to be rediscovered. I didn't just reminisce. I took action. I pulled out my phone and found the number for an old climbing partner, a guy named Ben who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. We drifted apart after I married Clara, who found his nomadic lifestyle unsettling. I hesitated for a second, the years of conditioning whispering that this was a waste of time, that I had responsibilities. Then I thought of the word placeholder and press call. Leo? Holy hell, is that you? Ben's voice was exactly as I remembered, loud and full of life. It's me, I said, a real smile spreading across my face for the first time in months. Listen, are the walls at Granite Peak still any good? They're better than ever, man. You coming out of retirement? Something like that, I said. I'm thinking of taking a trip. A long one. Maybe I'll start there. We talked for half an hour, and with every word, I felt a layer of dust being blown off my own soul. When I hung up, the path forward was no longer a vague idea. It was a clear route marked with handholds. My next call was to my lawyer. The following week was a blur of quiet, decisive action. While Clara was at her late meetings with Marcus or her appointments at the clinic, I was executing my own plan. I met with a financial advisor and, with my lawyer's guidance, began the painstaking process of separating our assets. It was a quiet, legal coup. I moved my inheritance into a protected trust. I separated our investment accounts. I drew a clear, unbreachable line down the middle of the life she thought she was about to plunder. I wasn't stealing from her. I was simply protecting what was mine, what I had earned, and what my family had left me. She had been counting on the predictability of the passive man I'd become. She never imagined that man was also a meticulous financial manager who kept every record. The final piece was the house. This house was her masterpiece. Every piece of furniture, every shade of paint was a testament to the life she had curated. It was the physical manifestation of my cage, and I was going to sell it. I waited until the following Saturday. I let her sleep in. I made pancakes. I was the perfect placeholder husband. I waited until we were sitting across from each other at the dining table, the morning sun streaming in through the large windows that looked out onto the manicured lawn. Clara, I began, my voice even. We need to talk about our portfolio. She looked up a little confused. Our investment portfolio? It's Saturday, Leo. No, our real estate portfolio, I said. This house. The market is at an absolute peak. We can make a 30% profit if we sell now. From a purely financial perspective, it's the logical move. We could downsize, free up capital. It's a smart exit strategy. I used her language. Not the language of emotion, but of business. Exit strategy. The words landed like stones. She stared at me, her mind clearly racing. This didn't fit her narrative. A sale would complicate everything. Her plans with Marcus, her image of stable home life she was being forced to leave. Sell the house? Leo, that's insane. This is our home. Is it? I asked, my voice still calm. Or is it just an asset? You've always been the one to say we can't be sentimental about finances. You taught me that. I paused, letting my words sink in. I've already spoken to a realtor. She's coming on Monday to do a valuation. The mask finally cracked. The serene, empathetic planner was gone, replaced by a cornered strategist. You did what? Without talking to me? Who the hell do you think you are? I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. The performance was over. I'm the placeholder, I said quietly, and my chapter is over. I read the script, Clara. The Nightingale plan. All of it. The color drained from her face. I saw every emotion flicker in her eyes. Shock, fear, and then a flash of pure, unadulterated fury. Not because she was caught, but because she had lost control of the narrative. I know about Marcus, I continued, my voice level, cutting off any denial she was about to form. I know about the clinic. I know the baby isn't supposed to be for us. It's supposed to be for you and him. I know you were planning to paint me as the villain who wouldn't give you the family you suddenly decided you wanted. I stood up from the table. You were right. You did build a good man. You build a man who is smart enough to see the whole board. And you've already been checkmated. I left her sitting there, surrounded by the beautiful, expensive things she had acquired, her perfect narrative in tatters. I didn't wait for the tears or the rage. I just walked to the front door, picked up the old expedition backpack I'd brought down from the attic, and opened it. The realtor is coming at 10 on Monday, I said, without looking back. You should probably tidy up. And then I walked out, not just of the house, but of the life that had never truly been mine. The open road felt like a blank page. And for the first time in years, I was the one holding the pen. The first breath of free air was intoxicating. It wasn't the crisp, clean air of a mountain peak, just the exhaust-tinged air of a suburban street. But it felt like the purest oxygen I had ever tasted. I didn't drive aimlessly. I drove north, towards the granite cliffs Ben had told me about, the city shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just a smudge of light pollution against the horizon. For 3 days, I didn't speak to anyone about what had happened. I climbed. I pushed my body, my atrophied muscles screaming in protest. My soft office hands scraped raw on the unforgiving rock. With every upward pull, with every precarious foothold, I felt like I was shedding a layer of the man I had pretended to be. The fear was real, a primal, immediate terror that left no room for the dull ache of betrayal. Up there, clinging to the side of a cliff, there were no narratives, no 5-year plans, just the rock, my own breathing, and the next move. It was the most alive I had felt in 7 years. On the third night, sitting by a campfire with Ben, my phone buzzed for the 100th time. It was Clara. I had ignored her calls, her frantic texts that had cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally, a pathetic attempt at gaslighting. Asterisk, you've clearly had some sort of breakdown, Leo. I'm worried about you. Please come home so we can talk. Asterisk. Ben glanced at the screen, then at me. You gonna answer that? No, I said, tossing a twig into the fire. There's nothing left to say. There's always something left to say, he countered, poking the logs with a stick. You don't have to talk to her for her. You have to do it for you. Close the book. Otherwise, you'll carry it around forever. He was right. I was carrying the weight of our unsaid final words. The next morning, I found a spot with a clear signal, took a deep breath, and called her. She answered on the first ring. Lau, oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? Her voice was a perfect blend of panic and relief, the voice of a concerned wife. The performance was back on. I'm fine, Clara, I said, my voice flat, giving her nothing to work with. Phoenix, you disappeared. I was about to call the police. Were you? I asked. Or were you calling your lawyer to see how my unstable behavior would play in a divorce settlement? Silence. I had stripped the fiction away again, leaving her with the uncomfortable truth. What do you want, Leo? She finally asked, her voice turning cold and hard. The mask was off. I wanted to let you know that I've accepted a preemptive offer on the house, I said. It was a lie, but a necessary one. A cash buyer closing in 2 weeks. You'll get your half of the equity wired to your account once you've signed the papers. You did what? She shrieked, the sound tinny through the phone. You can't sell the house without my consent. I can't actually, I said calmly. Our prenup gives me sole discretion over the property, since it was purchased with my inheritance. You probably should have had your own lawyer look at it back then, instead of just letting Marcus's firm glance it over as a favor. I had just handed her the final, missing piece of the puzzle, the realization that my quiet compliance had never been ignorance. I had always known how to protect myself. I had just chosen not to, out of love. There was a long pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, recalculating, trying to find a new angle. "The baby, Leo," she said, her voice dropping, becoming soft and pleading. "What about the baby?" I made a mistake. I was scared. It should be our baby. This was her endgame. Her last desperate move on the board. The emotional checkmate she had been so sure would win her the game. A year ago, it might have. The old Leo would have crumbled. But the man standing on the side of a mountain, with dirt under his nails and the sky in his heart, was immune to her fiction. "There is no baby, Clara," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Not for us. That baby was never about family. It was about an exit strategy. It was a line item in your business plan, and your plan has been liquidated." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to hear the tears or the rage. I just said, "Goodbye, Clara," and ended the call. I blocked her number. I blocked her sister. I blocked Marcus. I digitally amputated the entire infected limb of my past life. The silence that followed was vast and clean. The book was closed. It's been 2 years. I never went back to the city. My lawyer handled the sale of the house and the final divorce proceedings. As I suspected, the Nightingale plan fell apart without its primary investor and the stage I had provided. Marcus, a man allergic to complications and bad PR, dropped Clara the moment she became a liability. The perfect narrative had a fatal flaw. It relied entirely on my being the villain, and I had simply refused to play the part. I spent the first year traveling. I cashed out a portion of my portfolio and bought a ticket to Patagonia. I climbed. I filled my old passport with new stamps. I met people whose lives weren't measured in fiscal quarters and billable hours. I sat in cafes and sketched faces in a new sketchbook, filling the pages not with ghosts, but with life. I was finding my way back to the man I was before I tried to become the man for someone else. Eventually, I found my way to a small mountain town in Colorado. I bought a small, rustic cabin that needed work. I spent my days renovating it with my own hands and my afternoons hiking in the Rockies. I started a small consulting business, helping people manage their finances so they could pursue their own passions, early retirement, travel, and new venture. I used my old skills not to build wealth, but to build freedom for myself and others. I don't hate Clara. I don't feel much of anything for her now. She's just a character in a story about a man I used to be. Her betrayal was a catalyst, the geological pressure that transforms soft carbon into something unbreakable. She thought she was leaving a placeholder, a finished project, but she was wrong. She was leaving a man dormant, like a seed buried under compacted earth. Her departure was the earthquake that finally broke the surface, and for the first time in a long time, I was free to grow towards the sun. Thanks for listening to this story on betrayal and beyond. Now it's your turn. What moment in this story was the most powerful for you? The discovery of the Nightingale plan, or the final phone call where he closed the book for good? This story explores how we can lose ourselves in a relationship, becoming a placeholder in our own lives. Have you ever had a moment of clarity that forced you to reclaim your own story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more. And remember, sometimes the end of one chapter isn't a tragedy. It's the beginning of your own epic.